Welcome. First, I would like to start with thank you. Thank you all who have come here. So actually, it was supposed to be like the largest gathering after COVID here, international one. We are where we are in a little bit different conditions than we would have been expecting. But anyway, so even more, I appreciate everyone who is here. And also big thanks for everybody who is online, because we are making this this conference more, so I think more broad because of different time zones and of different regions participating. So, and also I really want to thank actually our local support who have been supporting RIXC for many years. So that's also our State Cultural Capital Foundation, which has been grown together like from the 90s with us, and also now supporting the festival already for more than 10 years, like with a special program. So is with the City Council, which also has been supporting specifically the festivals in the beginning, just small, those ones organized by NGOs, and now even in bigger scale and all over Riga. So I think this local support is also what today is supporting this SPLINTERED Dialectics Festival edition, because we are in between EU projects too. One just finished and the other one not started yet. So that's why I thank you for all this Latvian state and this cultural policy, which has been supportive for these years. So we are organizing these festivals already for 20 plus, so you don't know how many editions. For all these years, we have been trying to envision. We were specifically been challenging the future forward, where we go with new technologies, with the advance of the internet, with since the 90s, and later following different other technologies from GPS to radio telescopes, satellites, and more recent decade we are working with like kind of also connecting it with the nature. So we work with this technological perspective and with the Renewable Futures Network, which is Baltic-Nordic, our cooperation. And this year, maybe this way we missed something, but we realized that actually, this is the year, and in spring we produced our festival, that not really much we can offer for the visions. How to organize the festival when after the war has been started. So then I started to talk to different teams of my friends, and because I cannot also, we realized that we can offer the platform, but we definitely will step back this time from our visions, which we usually are happy to introduce and reflect with the other artists and other researchers. Yeah, so discussing with my team, Naturally Artificial Intelligence Art Association, an emerging group of artists and researchers and theorists in Karlsruhe. So we came up with this idea of the splinters. So basically these are the only different perspectives, small perspectives or personal perspectives, what we can put on a table here and what everybody else was invited to put on the table here. And then without history, we cannot see the future, and that's why I invited also Andreas Bruckmann to curate, to think about the first day, about the Deep Europe Symposium proposing, so how we can look back to the histories of Eastern Europe, this buffer zone which exists between imperialistic Russia, which exists between the Western Europe, and in a global scale it's a bit difficult at this particular moment when it's so intense here to look, but there are also possibly future possibilities to discuss this. Yeah, and then the first day is Deep Europe Symposium here, so we are like it's in this text on the website. You can also find all materials, programs, abstracts, biographies of the people. Go to festival2022.rixc.org. And there is also this concept which we have come up, so that this year we we don't expect to provide answers, because where we have landed in this world of we call splintered realities, is where we only can discuss different maybe perspectives. Yeah, I would say even not really strategies, neither even tactics. So, and the second day we'll go into a little bit more like one of the splinters will be, it's called nature cultures, and it will be more like introducing also one of the possibilities how to talk, so how to learn maybe from the nature with some ecofeminist philosophies, and maybe different other Vatari ecosophies, or Latour's terrestrial coexistence. So that will be for the second day. It's organized together with Naya Center from Karlsruhe. And then the third day of the conference will be is organized together with my long years partner Kristin Berghaus and Living Technologies team from Oslo. So this is more already we are discussing this particular relations which exist between the human body, maybe technologies, and the living organisms. So this already will be for the Saturday, the discussion. And if you go, we have the exhibition in Kim, running still until 16th of October, sorry. And you can also find all the artists on the website. So they are represented there, and so there are already pictures from the exhibitions. And here is the program, and if you can open, so if you open it up, these little squares, so then you can see also all people's biographies and their abstracts that they will be talking about. And there are all these 3 days, so day 2 and day 3. And so I will play just a couple of minutes, even without the sound, this video for those who are not here from this exhibition. So because what we have been with the years also realizing that these art exhibitions, which we are kind of addition to the festival, they have become even more central than just editions. And here also we try to connect some discussions or some events with the artworks which are presented in the exhibition. So that's why this short video teaser, it will be online. I just got it edited, so it will be also available online. So you can also a little bit take a look to this exhibition closer. And so this first artwork by Sache Rachel, it's one who we have been also using for our design, those pieces of the stones. Andreas, I think I'm getting there. Yes, okay. For my short introduction.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe you can just leave that running while I say just very briefly warm welcome to everybody who is here in Riga at RIXC Gallery, and those people who are watching online through the Zoom, and hopefully also participating. We've all learned the hard way over the last 2 years that doing hybrid events is not the nicest thing to do, but we've learned to somehow make do. And so we will make an effort to involve people who are connected through Zoom as much as possible. You can make yourself visible or heard either through the direct channel, or there are also people here who are watching the chat. So if you have questions or comments, you can also write straight into the chat. Otherwise maybe you have phone numbers or something to contact us if something's not working properly. Otherwise, my role, at least for the largest part of today, is going to be timekeeping, because as you will have seen on the program, we have quite a number of presentations to go through, but more importantly, we have, Raza and I, envisaged that this is really going to be a long conversation that we want to have this afternoon, and which is why all the presentations are limited to 15 minutes, and the presenters have been informed that they are really asked to stay within that limit, and then that gives us time to actually ask questions or make comments or continue the conversation outside of the presentations. And it will give us time to take breaks, which are also very important, not only for the smokers, the few that there are left, but also to talk more deeply. And we are going to go for dinner tonight. Those of you who are here and who want to join are, of course, also welcome to join us there. And in terms of the structure of the afternoon, you will have seen that, but we will start with a session where we see 4 presentations from people who are logging in through Zoom. People spread around the world who would have liked to be here, but for various reasons can't be here in person, but they are online now, and they will give their perspectives on this let's say, enigmatic theme of Deep Europe, which, you know, even when we started using it in the mid-1990s, an important point was always that we didn't really know what it was, and that it was possible to speak about it, but a definition we never managed, and I hope that at the end of today we will also not manage a conclusive definition for that. And so, if there is nothing else, I would like to hand over to Luciza Bujagiev, who is hopefully online. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen now. No. And then Luciza should come up. There he is. Hello.
Oh, hi.
And
I'm here.
Maybe you can say something so that we can adjust the sound.
I will. Definitely. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's getting better. Yes.
Okay. So I'm in a concrete studio in the middle of Berlin, south of Kochstrasse U-Bahn station. So right at the point of, you know, former division between East and West and North and South. What I would like to show you today is something that starts about 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. And one of the sort of applications or real life experiences, which I could only explain because of what happened in 1997 during the Deep Europe workshop in Kassel in the hybrid workspace. This is where, without knowing what Deep Europe meant then or now, we must realize that the notion of deep or deepness has been applied to all sorts of things, from data to government to, I don't know, I mean, a lot of things. The unknown depths of our world's reality at the moment. However, in this case, the first part of the short presentation has to do with overlapping identities, a notion that I was using at the time in order to explain what the depth of Europe means, like overlapping claims over shared territories, in quotation marks, be that as it may, language, history, culture, territory, especially now, identity, and so on and so forth. This was a case of personal and global kind of overlap. And firstly, it has this very pretentious title of "The Greatest Love of My Life Was an Non-Human." And it has to do with a biennial, which happened in 2008 in Santa Fe, New Mexico, southwest of the United States. A biennial called Lucky Number 7. And it's a case of synchronizing post-colonial and post-conquest stress disorders. And I will end up with how I see this problematic from 25 years ago of Deep Europe workshop related to the problematic of Documenta 15, now which just ended in Kassel a week ago or so. So the post-colonial, post-conquest stress disorders are shared between these two people. On the left, myself, on the right-hand side, Rose B. Simpson, a Native American artist who is now a very big...
Luchisa, you should share your screen.
I am sharing my screen.
We're not seeing it.
Okay. Are you seeing it?
It's starting to, yes, now we see it.
Okay, so I will just go like for the first, hold on. This is the title. On the left-hand side is the post-conquest stress disorder because of Ottoman domination. On the right-hand side is the post-colonial stress disorder because of colonization of Native Americans. In this case, a Santa Clara Pueblo Indian from the Tewa language group. It has to do with something very simple. When I was in Santa Fe, I found out that post-colonial, post-conquest people share something. And that something results from a history of oppression lasting centuries, at which point the history allows for development of hybrid forms of cultural practices. For instance, these are material folklore, kukeri, the so-called kukeri, who are at particular time in the year, they're chasing the evil spirits in Bulgaria, but I'm sure that in remote parts of Europe, like Switzerland mountains or whatever, there are similar practices which are not Christian, which are deeply pagan and deeply folkloric and hybrid in this way. And these visually, I found out because of my colleague Rose B. Simpson and interaction with Native American young artists in Santa Fe at the time, look very similar and have the same function as some of their samples of material folklore, like the Kachina dolls and this religion related to the spirits. Okay, and some dance practices. In this case, this is a deer dancer in the Pueblo, in the Santa Clara Pueblo. And from the southeast of Bulgaria, very near to the Turkish border, a dancing of a nestinarka, which is, who is dancing as a žarptica, well, the bird related to burning coals, and she is dancing on burning coals in a deeply non-Christian, pre-Christian hybrid kind of ritual, which is now, of course, a touristic attraction, but it is a product of existence for more than 5 centuries in a kind of situation where you have like somebody else's political system, cultural religion, and you have to sort of dominating you, and you have to make do with whatever tools you have. And finally, on the 4th of July of 2008, I was invited to the Santa Clara Pueblo to celebrate with the Native Americans the 4th of July, which in itself is an oxymoron. I mean, Native Americans who were colonized are celebrating the National Day of America. And so we did a lot of fireworks. And one of the, I learned a lot of baseball. And one of the things that I also learned was that there are coincidences in very kind of body-related practices. Like during fireworks, I burned my fingertips and I touched the lobe of my left ear, which I'm sure all of you, or many of you who have lived in a village somewhere in Europe, have learned from your grandmothers that in the lobe of the ear, like the bottom part of the ear, there are no nerve endings, so there is no pain. This is why we use this part for earrings. And if you burn your fingers and you touch the lobe of your ear, you transfer the pain, and there is no blister. Okay, but a Native American friend of mine, Carl, who is an Apache and Arikari, he saw me doing it. It's this guy right here. I don't know if you can, wait a minute. Okay, so this is Carl, this. So he saw me doing it, and because he was already jealous because of other things, very personal, he asked me, how do you know to do this? And I said, from my grandmother in the mountains, in the Balkan mountains. And he said, you're not supposed to know this practice. I said, why? Because this is a secret knowledge only allowed to be possessed by the medicine man of the Apache. And at which point I have to admit that I have no idea why we have the same knowledge, but I certainly didn't steal it from the Apache medicine man. And this coincidence is for me, it's a sample of identity overlap without any logical explanation apart from relation of humans to nature, okay, and learning by experience. Another way of establishing an identity in America, and you know that Bulgaria has absolutely no image in the States, is that in Los Alamos, which is part of the sacred land of this same tribe of the Santa Clara Pueblo, Bulgaria features as a major world power because we have a nuclear power plant. And at that time, there were not that many countries that have nuclear power plants. I was so close to the Native Americans that eventually they featured my face. Okay, so I'll just, in a pro-Obama advertisement campaign. I mean, this was the first time when Native Americans self-organized to support an American presidential candidate, in this case, Obama. And eventually I discovered the patterns on my friend's wedding dress, which are practically the same as the patterns on my ex-wife's wedding dress. And then I found out historically that it took a special papal bull, a decree, the so-called Sublimus Deus, to declare Rosa's ancestors and all these Native Americans that although they do not belong to the kingdom of Christ, they are still human beings not to be enslaved. Of course, nobody followed this kind of decision by the Pope in reality, but anyhow, it was there. And nearly at the same time, where I come from, and all the people who were within the Ottoman Empire at the time, they were awarded, especially the Christians, they were awarded the status of legal subject, a millet, a people. This is why I think that cultures who have been conquered or colonized have some kind of similitude, a kind of parallel habitation in a world of dominance, which produces hybridity, delayed modernization, and stress disorders. And this, apart from the technological developments and COVID, is the reason why I think that what we did in 25 years ago is still valid today. Going back to Documenta, which recently closed, and the most controversial participation of Taring Padi, this collective from Indonesia, I found this particular object in their presentation in the Hallesband, wherever it was. No human is illegal. If you remember, in 1997, during Hybrid Workspace and in the Orangerie, Deep Europe was one of the 10 workshops which left a trace, which we're now honoring. But the other one, which left a trace, I don't know what has happened now, was a workshop by a German group of artists, which was called Kein Mensch ist illegal. No human is, no man, no person is illegal. Which I find really interesting because there is this thread going through large exhibitions that in one way or another shows our concerns with what happens in the world. In the last 2 days in Documenta in Kassel, there was this object which was offered to Rohan Gruppe to be included as part of their public space program. They refused. They didn't even answer because this object is deeply, deeply racist. It uses images which belong to somebody else. In this case, the rainbow, LGBT plus identity, and then the cube and the black top and bottom. In the cubic form, they refer to the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia. And this is racist because this offends Muslims in a very deep way. A few days ago, Ana Teixeira Pinto published an article in the Journal of Visual Culture trying to interpret and think about the whole controversy related to Documenta 15. After the question of Jörg Hanschel, in whatever interview he did with one of the members of the Rohan Gruppe curatorial collective with Farid Rakun, was, as a visitor, this is the question. You sometimes ask yourself, am I a participant in a dialogue or just a fence sitter at a meeting of groups from the global south. And the answer of Farid Raccoon was, now you know how we, the marginalized, always felt as onlookers, which for me is a direct connection to Deep Europe and the workshop, because at the time in '97, most of Eastern European participants felt as onlookers, as marginalized. You remember this logo, a brilliant logo that you guys invented. I came later to the workshop. Just a reminder here, the Orangerie at the time of the hybrid workspace, and especially at the time of Deep Europe workshop. You see this slogan? And you remember Dima Pilikin, who was reading Russian literature in front of the Orangerie on the lawn to everybody's amazement and marvel. Добро пожаловать, welcome in Russian. Nowadays, 25 years later, we don't know. I mean, Russia has finally shown his real face. At the time, '97, it was the decade of crime, corruption, total corruption, disorder, but still we had a lot of hopes which have now disappeared. We did this performance, Deep Europe Visa Office. We did this in the background, and I hear there is Inke Arns. This person here, oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, hold on. Okay. You know, do you remember this person in the green t-shirt? This is Rasa Smitte. Just as beautiful now as she was then. and this is Andreas Brockman. Oh, sorry. And this is the background, I mean, the Hybrid Workspace, Deep Europe workshop. And then going back to Documenta this year, I was part of this composting network, part of Documenta 15. Composting network had its own space, about 200 square meters in the Hafenstrasse venue. And it was a result of a collaboration between Ruangruppe, ICA, Sofia, and a lot of other partners all over the world about how to, it was like a think tank, what to do after Documenta. You get a lot of knowledge, a lot of input, a lot of practices and knowledge about them, a lot of concerns. How do you compose them in order to come up with a new platform? Apart from the technology and all the cables which we see here, it's the same situation of debate, of talking, of arguing, of discussing. And finally, my last image is like this, which I found in a Ruru house somewhere in the basement. I find this really attractive. Lumbungs of the world unite. I mean, you all know where this Lumbungs of the world unite, where it comes from. But what you don't know, and this is like the last part of my presentation, and which in the proposal it was referred to as hermeneutics of display. For the 3 years that I've been communicating with Ruangruppe, we started using a very unusual language, which has nothing to do with new technology, but it has to do a lot to do with agriculture, for good or bad. One of the terms is harvest. So at first, you are investing your knowledge, then you're composting it, then you're activating spaces, and then you're harvesting the results, whatever they might be. So I feel that the link between Deep Europe in 25 years ago and today is this particular experience of knowledge which is shared, practices which are shared, which are exchanged, compared, utilized, discarded, whatever. And by practices, I also mean like including the link between the human and nature, the human and new technology. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciza. Thank you very much. We have the difficult task of starting this up now. Maybe I'll start with a question, and I'm very happy if any of you can join in and and help. Luceza, I'm curious, what with that story, both from the Nevada desert and from the Lumbung in Kassel, what you would make of the Europe in the deep Europe now. Should we drop that and find another metaphor that is less specific about Europe?
Well, first of all, Santa Fe is not in Nevada. Although it is an arid area, Santa Fe is in the state of New Mexico, not Nevada. Nevada is further up north. New Mexico in this part is the Rio Grande River, the Pueblos, many of them, and they were never migratory. Those people always stayed where they are for thousands of years. Okay, well, this is one clarification, but the connection, deep Europe, and you know, deep now is not as more or less like overlapping, but it is like, we must think of it as a kind of a well, a compost volume where you can throw everything for it to be processed. I mean, all notions, all sorts of notions, practices, knowledge, and so on. And this is, I think, the main contribution of Ruan Gruppe to Documenta. And Documenta, if it wants to be in the future, a kind of a major player in the international exchange of ideas, you know, practices, whatever, objects, if you wish, it will have to forget its past, and it will have to think of reintegrating Europe within the whole world context, not just Germany. It started after the war with the purpose of reintegrating Germany culturally within the whole world, you know, the culture of the whole world. Now, overcoming, reflecting on, and so on. Now, it just has to remember that, for instance, I don't know, I mean, there are a lot of people suffering all over the world, not just in this place or that place. There are a lot of cases of racism and genocide, even before the 20th century. Maybe not the same in terms of numbers, but in terms of human suffering, for sure. And we have to go back like 500 or 600 years ago in order to remember that people lived perfectly well without us Europeans imposing anything on them. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I think my question is more strategic in terms of, you know, which language do we use to describe our own activities? And now at this moment we are in the Deep Europe Symposium, and I wonder whether, you know, in the light of what you present and your argumentation, whether it would be better to drop the reference to Europe at all, or is it something that is necessary in order to acknowledge the position from which this conversation, also here in Riga, is taking place?
Funny, do you remember the syndicate? Of course you do. You sent an email now. One thing about the syndicate in the late 90s, and it applies to today and new technology, is that no matter how much we, and people that were much more engaged, much deeper in their engagement with the syndicate than I was, no matter how much we communicated online, we always felt the need every once in a while to meet physically in real space. I think this is like also a useful lesson nowadays, like strategically. 3 years of communication with Ruan Gruppe, this was all Zoom. This was never physical. And it backfired because at the end, what happens in reality is what matters. How we communicate in Zoom, this is just like strategically positioning of debate, discourse, exchange of idea, but tactically, you sooner or later, you need to have a presence in the physical world and visibility in the physical world. If you want to make a difference, that is. If we want to make a difference.
Andrea, shall I?
Yes, please. Yeah. Kalini.
Yeah. whatever. Tell him it's me. It's funny that this discussion was pending between New Mexico and Documenta, where we had this conflictual situation during the summer. I'll tell you why, because around 100 years before Luchezar, there was a wandering Jew called Abi Warburg, who discovered the ritual of the serpents in New Mexico and Kachina gear and puppets. And through that, he had a revelation of the deep, again that word which I actually hate, deep truth of the traumatic cultural basis of European culture, Mediterranean culture, which is the Dionysiac energy. So look a bit at the circle. Actually, Abi Warburg made a circle of his wanderings in the United States. It's a circle which turns back to the Mediterranean, which is seen as a complex both south and north of that sea. So nothing is just coincidence, things are repeating. And to close this circle that Luchezar so brilliantly opened, I have to say that the cookie are present also in Romania. I don't know what the word means in your language, Luchezar. In Romanian, cook means cuckoo. And it's a very valid ritual.
So it means what?
Nothing to do with serpents from New Mexico. It has a different type of procedures, but it's also about pain and relief from pain and the redemption and bringing the fertility of the soil. So it's similar. So to close the circle, we go to Castle. I think Castle is a very typical story of bad management, which comes from lack of communication and lack of knowledge. If somebody has been to Indonesia, which I was privileged enough to have been, would have understood very well the fault lines and the default lines that are animating that culture, and would have been able to negotiate better the presence of Indonesian artists in Kassel, because what they did there had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It had a lot to do with a different type of looking at the visual, and with a very different history. I'm not saying that putting that image in Kassel was a good idea, but what I'm saying, it would have been a good idea that the people who invited those curators in Kassel took the time to research a bit the cultural background in Indonesia, which is very, very different. That's not only obvious in that Lumbung thing, but also in other events during that those 100 days. You know, there was around the corner somebody who is a big specialist, whose name is Charles Session, who made a brilliant exhibition about Indonesia and its post-colonial identity. Just a matter of making a phone call. Thank you.
Can I answer briefly?
Sure, of course.
I've never specified that cookery is a practice only restricted to Bulgaria, Romania included, North Macedonia, Greece, parts of Switzerland, anywhere. The bottom line is, or the overriding common denominator is chasing evil spirits and the spirits, the realm of the spirits. And Kachina culture is related to spirits. Abi Warburg, notwithstanding, there was a brilliant exhibition, by the way, in Berlin, in Haus der Kultur in der Welt, about Abi Warburg a few years back. I know about Abi Warburg, as you do. I know about Hans Belting, as you do. This is not part of what I'm concerned with in terms of private artistic experience. What I'm concerned with is post-colonial, post-conquest identities. Abi Warburg researched for his own reasons. I did not research. I participated in an exhibition and I found out that there is an extremely vibrant potential for identifying a case of overlapping identities, a thing which for me is related to Deep Europe. As far as the round group goes, Indonesia, Charles did a biennial in Jakarta, you know, the Jakarta biennial. Why were they selected? Is this art? You know, it is something that is to be debated, but what I can tell you is that Documenta has never been so open. when in 2002, 20 years ago, Okve Envisor started the post-colonial discourse in relation to things happening with, Sarat Maharaj, Irit Raghuv, goldsmiths in London, I was offended because he totally neglected us. I mean, us as a post-colonial subject or practices. He wouldn't even listen to me talking when I told him that I still live where I live in Sofia, Bulgaria. That was 2001, a year before Documenta. Only 20 years later, we're able to see this breakthrough. I mean, I'm not so much concerned about what happens in Germany. In this way, deep Europe is probably, we should forget about Europe. Yeah, indeed. We should think about the whole world and its depth and the hermeneutics of this kind of fucking complex world. I mean, at the moment, what my problem is with Documenta is not really what happened between Indonesia and this caricature of Taring Padi. This is, I'm sorry to say so, but this language, visual language they're using, it goes back to Berlin Dadaism. It goes back to Otto Dix and Georg Gross, John Hartfield, and Weimar Germany, like using caricature of a caricature. So I can come up with a whole art historical line of how this language was used in the States in the 80s, let's say, or the 90s, or in Bulgaria in the 50s. I'm sure in Romania we can find some examples, and it's going too long. So yes, forget it.
But
let's look in the future.
The Documenta debate, I think it's interesting to see, and you helped us to kind of go in that direction, to see how the discussions around Documenta this summer intersect with the discussions that we're focusing on here. But I think not everywhere do they interact in an interesting way that is productive for our conversation here. So I'm curious to see how where those connecting points are. I'm very happy that you showed those images from the hybrid workspace because visiting Documenta myself in the summer, I thought that part of the challenges of the curatorial program were really challenges that we had been exposed to in the hybrid workspace, and now it was just inflated and kind of turned into the whole Documenta all over the different venues. So I think it's an interesting path to follow up in the next hours and in the next days. For now, I would like to thank you for your presentation, and I would like to move on to Mitos Petanak, who is calling in from Budapest. Here's Mitos. Hello.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Okay. Everything is fine? Can you hear me?
Super. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, something about this short talk. This is not a presentation, more only fragments or splinters for a possible presentation. The title, in the program description, I read, we don't expect to provide answers. I think I can fulfill this task. The title of the section, in the rear view mirror of history, and I am absolutely fine with this. When Andreas Brockman asked me for a title, and in a sudden, this, what you can read, came to my mind, omnipresence or omnivoyance, the dialectics of vision in the rear and rearward. And I sent him with a comment. In his response, Andreas assured me that I can be enigmatic, and this will happen. The explanation of the title, omnivoyance, refers to Nicholas Cusanus, omnipresence to, or ubiquity to Paul Valéry, while the subtitle intends to be a latent hint to the nice metaphor in the title of Russell Smith book. At the beginning, I briefly refer to excerpts from the two books of Cusanus, the Docta Ignorantia and the Visione Dei, in the latest there is the description of an experiment about the personal experience. How is it when an icon, the icon of the Holy Face, is watching you? This impression is so strong, wrote Cusanus, that whoever is looking at it cannot even imagine that the icon is watching everyone else. A nice reference or interpretation of Cusanus' experiment is in Milos Forman film, The Black Peter. The picture is watching you. In the case of the omnivoyance, the main thing is to understand, and this is also from Cusanus, that there is a unity of that three: the perceiver, that which is perceived, and the act of perceiving. The experiment in the Visione Dei, where the illusion is so strong that all individual feels that the icon watches only that subject or subjectum, inherently contains also the time concept in the Docta Ignorantia, which is on the screen now in like manner, the present or the now enfolds time. The past was the present and the future will became the present. Therefore, nothing except an ordered present is found in time. I promise that during this short talk, I intend to somehow speak or show self-referential elements, statistics, for example, about the personal use of media in time. And this slideshow is partly about the preparations for this talk, including particles of time spent from the formulation of the title till the now we are at the moment. For example, I had to look after the question who invented the rear view mirror. There are several approaches I found, but none of them mentioned the allegorical figure of prudence or phronesis, which can be found, for example, in the small encyclopedia of Comenius Orbis Pictus, as she is double-faced. She can simultaneously look forward via a perspective, a telescope, towards Kairos, Occasio, and backwards with the help of a looking glass to the past. So she had two tools and two faces. We have only one tool and one Facebook. As I said during the preparation, I look back to the past until this now, 25 years or more, but we all spent in the context of time and media in this world. And I also found photographs as memories of forgetting or enigmas of remembrance. For example, these two about people who are present in front of personal projection at a certain given coordinates, probably on Earth, and others who are somewhere else and the coordinates are unknown. I decided to make a personal overview about my use of media tools in a chronological order. The first idea was to depict how the new technical media deals with time. I have a theory about all of these, but never try to visualize all in each other's context. So at first I made this personal medium historiogram or diagram or chronology, parallel chronology, the examination of the use of diverse media, or as my late friend used to say, the most important part of research is the rearrangement of your notes into a new structure. And this information management is your own responsibility. Here is another arrangement, the number of tools or media used simultaneously in the same time period. There's a nice timeline. Meanwhile, one finds things, pictures, notes, which are intended to influence this talk towards a certain direction, either apocalyptic directions. To make decisions which may further always have to read some books from the past again and contextualize these pictures. Here's a book about the year 2000, published in 1963. And the cover picture leads at least three possible directions. It reminds me the television outcome and the Google, of course, and a nice recent design by an artist, which is at C-Cube homepage now, and also the title of it is homepage. The curator Anna Tüdös and the artist Mark Fridvalsky, what they did is quite similar to or my approach, revisited and reanimated the early net art period at C-Cube and contextualized it and made accessible again in a new framework with this, I think we are back again in our topics. We may ask, are media vehicles of sorts? Abby Warburg was mentioned. And if so, which, how, why, and what are the differences and similarities from spatial and temporal aspects, focusing on speed and history as a skeleton of progress or predictions for the future. So back to the picture in Comenius' book, it shows not only two directions, but two aspects of time. The quantitative, the chronos, and the qualitative, which is kairos, mainly forgotten. Using this, for example, to describe photography, it is very easy to understand the photo time that is the end of the exposure related to kairos, the things to come, but after only chronos it happened. What we generally call the time of exposure, in other words, is the interval, intervallum Latin, a very important concept, not only Vertosian or Deleuzian, but from practical aspects to differentiate photography and film. This picture is not fully elaborated, neither those which are related to television and video, especially the video feedback. But I thought yesterday that at this point, I definitely shall have not enough time to explain these details. So we jump via computer arts to our digital era, the multiple simultaneity or pseudo-ubiquity, and we are at the region central, the archive and the present situation, which looks similar. But how we can describe the system, especially how we can locate ourselves in the system, not physically, spatially, but more essentially or existentially. I show some ephemera examples for the concept of intervallum. Gyula Power is showing his artwork, Marx Lenin in Stuttgart 2009. Well-dressed woman descending a staircase and a walking neon. The same light bulbs closer and two mobile picture with 6 hands. The interval of the inside-outside world. In this artwork, in this picture, it is visible and hopefully understandable that this picture was made with that camera which is in the picture, in the monitor picture in the picture. Yes, so at the borderline of cognition, reality, reason, we may accept as a fact that photons or light enter to the brain via the eye for the purpose to convert them into information, that is, to think. But we can also be skeptic. Reading this statement on the monitor from 1987, anything possible is real, I'm not sure whether we can accept or agree or not. And we are almost at the end of the slides. This known illusion or impossible object below was published together with the essential text by Leo Szilard, better to say the English translation of this text, but it is not a part of this text, neither the picture nor the description, the title of this picture. Leo Szilard on the decrease of entropy in a thermodynamic system by the intervention of intelligent beings has in itself a story or the history which you can find how it happened and how it refers to things which happened afterwards. The possible decrease of entropy by the intervention of intelligent being in a wider and maybe not hardcore scientific sense is my simple conclusion, or relates to my simple conclusion or message, which is a paradoxical reference to Voltaire. What we can do, it's a certain responsibility as well for doing so, is to cultivate the monadic Leibnizian info garden, which is normally at hand until it is still possible. And thank you for your attention. This is my last time.
Mitos, thank you very much for this tour de force. Any questions in the hall or from the Zoom audience?
Ach, Jensel ist auch schon da. Hallo. Jens ist auch schon online, anwesend.
I'm curious about the juxtaposition that you make of the two principles of time, the kairos and the chronos. Maybe this is thinking too quickly and too short, but I got the impression that the way in which you speak about the images was very much in the mode of the kairos, about the moment when the image is taken, what we see at that very moment, you know, and I wonder what, you know, how the metaphor of the rear view mirror, how it relates to chronos as the principle of time where narratives unfold and where time and its events become something that is, you know, that can only be remembered but not recuperated. So I don't know whether you have ideas about, you know, how your examples relate to these two different principles of time. You know, with the thought that I have in the back of my mind is that when we speak today about the syndicate, the theme of Deep Europe, and what they represent, they also have this heuristic dimension of speaking now and looking into that mirror now, into that rear view mirror, but at the same time there's also this unfolding of time that we can maybe grasp in a chronological perspective.
Yes, in case if we accept that time exists, because there are other approaches, for example, Leibniz, whom I mentioned, then the very simple difference between the Greek concept of kairos, or in Latin occasio, which is
Kairos intervene.
Yes. Miklos, we lose you.
Maybe you can text him.
Maybe he should cut off his camera and just
Yeah, maybe.
sound on.
Miklos, if you can hear us, you should.
did not push the button,
Miklos,
but will be.
Miklos, sorry, the last minute or so you were frozen, so we missed everything of your answer.
Yeah.
So far. So you would have to start again with your answer, please. Sorry. The image.
Yeah. Okay. So if you accept that time exists, because there are not other approaches, then it is very easy to differentiate of that two type of Greek concept of allegory of kairos and chronos. Kairos is the appropriate time. For example, when you make a photo, you don't know what will be in the picture because it's coming to you and you have no control. It's a very, very small time limit, but it's like kairos. But when it was done, it has nothing to do with kairos because the occasion, the appropriate time is over. It's related only chronos. You can make a chronology. And what we do is a chronology. But with the new tools, starting with film, I speak only about technical images. The situation slightly changes. With video, you have a kind of pseudo-simultaneity. There is a distance between the situation which is there with the recording, which can be live, and you cannot say it is the same time. It's a parallel present, because you can see what is recorded in real time, and you are there in that environment. And the next step is our virtual world, when this simultaneity expanded to a fake ubiquity. With the illusion that it's real, but it's only an extension to diverse times and diverse location of that simultaneity, which is not any longer a simultaneity. So the projection, which we are feeling now, this projection has a kind of relationship again with what we call kairos, because you don't know what I will say. but it's recorded, so we're part of the chronos and the chronology, which I cannot change afterwards. So this ambivalence was one of the point which I intended to point in, and another which we all can do, and it's very important that we have to deal with these data, these personal or extended history, because if you do not take care of the information you create or you use or you store, then you are beyond your responsibility, which is fake and which leads to entropy. If you do it to create information, to cultivate the information, then that's why I used Leo Szilard, nice physical study. I'm not a physicist, so I use it like an existing and inspiring text which has some relationship with the production of information as a contrary of entropy. So I don't know what was understandable and how I can continue, so it's better to stop now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
There's a question also from the chat. You can read it also.
Okay, Miklos is calling in, and he writes into the chat, dear Melenti Pandilovsky is calling everyone, writing to everyone in the chat, and he writes, dear Miklos, very inspirational. In regard to the notion of rear view mirror, do you agree with McLuhan's view that, quote, we look at the present through a rear view mirror? We march backwards into the future? Question mark. Are we marching backwards into the future?
No, I don't think so. I do not agree. I used at least 3 photographs from different locations, which I did inside the car. And there was one in which there was a huge trunk, silver back, and there was a mirroring. So the rear view mirror and another rear view mirror, but it was another object. So it was another space. So if we look this series, this endless regression of the rear view mirrors while we are marching forwards, then the dialectics became visible. So we cannot do anything else till we are on this earth, just using the metaphor of going forwards, and as history tells, we create new tools which is related to the rear view mirror, like photography or film or something like that, which are better tools than our own memories. And these tools infiltrate our present, but it does not mean that we are marching backwards. It means that the information culminates growing up, and there is another entity which you have to deal with, not only your own life, but these tons, these piles of information you have to deal with because you created them. So that is a kind of dialectics. I mean, maybe it was also not understood.
I think there's also a message in the chat from Luceza, but it's more speculative. And looking at the watch, I have to say, Luceza, sorry, you'll have to develop that thread in the chat.
Yeah, the angel of history. Yes, Pauke. Yes. And it's related to Oqui Envasor and the Venice Biennale and so on. Yes, it's important. It's important. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Miklos, for the presentation, for the wonderful images. And now we switch over to Sally Jane Norman. I don't know whether she's here. She was a moment ago. Here she is. Hello. Wonderful to see you, Sally.
Good to see you. Kia ora, greetings. Thanks, Andreas and Raza for the invitation. And it's really, it's wonderful and slightly scary following Miklos, because I think, and Lushazar, this is going to be a very subjective and quite personal kōrero or conversation. You're going to be stuck with my talking head. I'm not going to share screens. I'm just going to inflict my portrait on you, and probably something quite grasshopperish, given that I'm speaking from the Southern Hemisphere, where it's 1:20 in the morning. And I'm thinking and have written something, so I'm going to follow my text in order to try and stick to time. But it's curious how many things that have already cropped up that resonate with what I've been trying to write and think about. So, how to reflect on deep Europe in a rear view mirror. This is just being discussed. A mirror's reflections, of course, depend on where you're placed. Your position determines what you can see. And our interdependency with these reflections is even more complex with rear view mirrors, because they're largely used in situations where we're mobile. I think Miklos's images showed this. And where what we see depends on our position in a moving vehicle. And it depends on the environment the vehicle is moving through. Rear view mirrors let us safely move forwards as well as backwards, knowing what's behind us or what we're leaving behind as we travel ahead helps us to negotiate our path. For me, this is all very relevant with respect to Syndicate and 2022. In Te Reo, the indigenous Maori language of Aotearoa, New Zealand, the place I'm speaking from, this is encapsulated by concepts of time encountered throughout Polynesian cultures. Kei muri, designating the future, crudely translates as behind, while reference to the past, ingara o mua, translates as the days in front. We move forward towards our ancestors, whether they're human or more than human, recognizing our genealogy and our origins. Indebtedness to the past underpins our duty to the future, so it drives our current actions. And I'm intrigued by Miklos's nothing except an ordered present is found in time. I think these Polynesian concepts of time are very rich and really interesting when we're trying to sort questions of legacies to groups and communities, as we are here with Syndicate. It was suggested in some of our earlier discussions about this Syndicate session that perhaps we'd have to start from scratch in our conversations about Deep Europe. But actually starting from scratch means discarding the events that have shaped us, including the ones that brought us together over 25 years ago. So it means doing away with the rear view mirror of history. And I'm not going to do this. I'm interested in leveraging our shared history to renew the drive to open things up that for me characterized Syndicate. How to reflect on cultural encounters in the widest sense of the term, and to collectively build new horizons of possibility in this radically transformed context. Of course, it's odd participating from the Antipodes as a Kiwi and a deep European committed to the diversity that Deep Europe represents. But I'm grateful for recognition of this group as a messy formation to cherish and cultivate in Europe and elsewhere. As Lushazar has said, we need to be thinking broadly about the globe. And particularly this is important given the fraught geopolitics that are dominating Eastern Europe, cascading across and beyond the continent. Distance doesn't diminish the sense of connectedness, and sometimes bigger gaps generate stronger sense of links. And despite the advantages and relative safety of being so far away, New Zealand isn't necessarily a comfortable country or situation in many ways. including because of its distance. There are problems everywhere. So this is a subjective account of syndicate goals and contexts across gaps and links of 20,000 kilometers and 25 years. My first syndicate encounter at the Dutch Electronic Arts Festival in Rotterdam in '96, and it was moving earlier to see an image of Alex. This encounter spawned introductions that I'm hugely grateful for to countless online and physical networks. I'd been a member of a Paris media arts cooperative. I was working as a freelance translator with no institutional affiliations, although that changed. I was roaming on the edges of groups that interested me, excited by the European adventure, and liberated by internet's, fortunately at last, fast growth in France after initially slow uptake there. I'd also remained enthralled by earlier academic research on 20th century Central and Eastern European art, and vividly remember a Paris café terrace with Inca, discovering our shared passion for Malevich et al.'s Victory Over the Sun. It got cold when the sun went down in Paris, but the discussion kept us warm for hours. Remembering Malevich V2 East and this exchange with Inca is of course all the more moving today, given Malevich's birthplace in Kiev and his Ukrainian attachments. But in any case, and for all these reasons at the time, V2 East felt strangely at home, as did syndicates geographically and politically scattered, dislocated, yet ethically welded community. Syndicates' goals and contexts for me involved listening to and trying to deeply dialogue with others in the search for a more richly interconnected and often disturbingly and disruptively critical culturally diverse Europe. The English language as a key medium for deep Europeans is something I still find awkward. And of course, it's also a burning question here in Aotearoa, a now bilingual country, where the indigenous language conveys very different ways of thinking and living. For example, notions of time I've referred to earlier. And this reminds me of questions that arose at the Understanding the Balkans meeting organized by Malenti. I'm delighted he's speaking just after me, in Skopje in 2002. So this was post-syndicate, this was, I guess, Spectre. And there were two participants there who spoke fluent English, and all the others used a shared Slavic idiom for casual conversation, switching to English for the conference. The two of us, concerned that we were inhibiting exchange, we questioned the others, and they said that conversing in so-called foreign English offered a neutrality they couldn't get in their respective languages once discussion moved onto formal and often controversial terrain. Of course, this situation didn't diminish the importance of the other languages that were overridden, but it heightened general awareness and attunedness to the politics of languages and communications. And maybe these are things that were obvious for others, but for me it was really important to directly experience and assimilate them, as were the lessons that I learned at FACES meetings with Kathy Ray Huffman and others in Linz, where it was very clear that fluency, for example, with English language and style, doesn't necessarily improve exchange amongst people who are particularly sensitive and attentive to silence, hesitation, and apparent clumsiness. Again, that's a lesson that resonates with Aotearoa encounters, where what Europeans call silence can be read by Pacifica people as powerfully contributing to exchange. So these are syndicate experiences that were imprinted on my rearview mirror that have been informing my current travel, and they epitomize the value of openness to trying to learn from different perspectives, not by pseudo-consensus or ironing out differences, but by respecting the dynamics of possibly conflicting, irreconcilable viewpoints, splintered realities. How to make what Haraway calls situated knowledges speak to each other. This is a question that aligns with decolonization discussions that are really strong here, And to play with the Australian philosopher-artist Paul Carter's words, if a decolonizing, and I'd put there diversified deep Europe approach articulates local knowledges as situated, contingent, multi-sited, dispersed, and intricately connected to place, person, and identity formation, then how will they relate to one another? Valuing the multiplicity of local knowledges may produce post-colonial disintegration rather than radical anti-colonial integration. Situatedness in the 90s with Syndicate motivated our collective efforts to build media resources vital for our work and our very differently enabled communities. There was a focus on bandwidth that featured in the European Cultural Backbone work. And there was lobbying for support to facilitate exchanges and widen circulation of critical creative work, independent from tech market forces. Local perspectives informed group thinking and raised awareness of difference in needs. Today's different needs and splintered local perspectives are geared, of course, towards global issues that are impacting our survival as a species and a planet, interrelated military conflict, climate change, pandemics, oppressive regimes. These all fuel competition for energy and agricultural resources, for inhabitable land and air, and they urgently pose questions that were only just starting to really hit public awareness a quarter of a century ago, but that today impact all media, artistic, and cultural engagement. In my part of the world, this includes thinking about the precarious futures of Pacific Island nations that won't exist anymore within the next few decades. Tuvalu, Kiribati, Rotuma, Tokelau, Wallis and Futuna, Marshall Islands, these are all atoll-based countries whose peoples every day are undertaking a painful exodus from their homes to survive as climate refugees. This week's Pacific celebrations of Tuvalu Language Week discussed how to create a virtual home for a Tuvaluan population without Tuvalu. Limits the pandemic has imposed on mobility, combined with efforts to lower carbon-guzzling travel, have set questions of relocation, attachments, and community in a new light. I've been involved with the Vamoana Global Talanoa Network. Talanoa is a word used across the Pacific to signify a discourse of openness, trust, inclusivity. And we've been searching for ways to translate senses of protocol into virtual online modes. Sound played a key part in a conference we organized last year. There were recurrent surges of distinctive Pacifica drumming and the background sound of waves breaking on the shore that served as a very poignant presence, as many of the Talanoa participants reside on islands being submerged. The Global Talanoa Network, for me, exemplifies ethnomusicologist Stephen Feld's concept of acoustomology, engagement with environmental listening, tuning to the creative backdrops against which sonic knowledge can emerge, and I would say against which any kind of knowledge can emerge. But more generally, and this is obviously a ramble, an Antipodean splinter contribution, I'm trying with my work to align with what Feld defines as an ethics as well as an aesthetics of expansive listening. And it's something for which I feel hugely indebted to Syndicate's legacy and Syndicate's ethos. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Sally Jane, so much for this thoughtful journey through your sector of Deep Europe or Syndicate experiences. Again, I'm asking whether there are questions or comments or affirmations. Otherwise, the question that comes to mind for me is, I hear very well what you're saying, and I agree, and I want to reread your text very quickly to absorb it even more. What I want to ask is this dialectics of integration and disintegration that you also referred to, and you spoke about, if I noted that right, you know, a positive, or maybe positive trend towards a sort of disintegration in the context of the decolonial. And I wonder how that sits with the desire for integration within Europe that you're also very aware of through the work that you did on European projects. And there is always that ambivalence within that, you know, whether that's an integration towards a unified and centralized European state chaired by Brussels, or whether it is an integration that is cultural, that is aware of differences, and that, you know, in a situation like we're experiencing in Europe at the moment, that is also a way of protecting each other, showing solidarity, being together, and, you know, helping each other in the way that is possible. So, you know, I wonder how that integration sits in relation to, you know, sometimes also necessary processes of maybe not disintegration but disentanglement.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question, Andreas, and I think it was one already that haunted us a lot back in the 90s, because I think we were, well, certainly me as a French national, I was very excited by the idea of a more united Europe and a notion of European solidarity. But I think we were all also concerned about the risks of a bulldozer bureaucracy and a flattening and a leveling of the multiple European identities. And I think that was one of the very strong drivers of Syndicate. For me, it's a constant tightrope, and this is something I discuss a lot with a wonderful Maori philosopher colleague. I think that the lure of consensual kind of discourse that basically overrides difference is a very dangerous one, and that I like these notions that have come through perhaps philosophers like Chantal Mouffe of agonistic pluralism, or dynamic uncompromise that comes through Jeff Balker, or these fantastic philosophers, Viveros de Castro, and these wonderful philosophers of nature and culture from Brazil and from parts of the world that I don't think we hear enough from, who have actually superbly emphasized the importance of these very distinctive philosophies and identities. But at the same time, I think one can recognize and reflect identities that cannot be one's own. One cannot assimilate them, or it would be very it would be quite offensive for me to pretend that I can assimilate, for example, a Maori identity. I'm not an Indigenous New Zealander. So there's a need for respecting the difference and upholding the difference, and finding the media or the situations of social encounter whereby that solidarity that you're talking about can actually be felt and expressed. And I think that was one of the things that we did with the Global Talanoa Conference. We were using creatively constructed forms of protocols on the internet to actually devise ways to come together that were respectful of those differences, but that at the same time gave us an extraordinary sense of being together. And that's something that I recall very strongly from my syndicate meetings. As Lushazar said, the physical meetings were very important, and I regret not being with you. At the same time, you know, there is a worry about my carbon footprint from Aotearoa. So yeah, it's a bit of a long-winded answer. I like your question, and I think it's, for me, it's the real question.
Thank you. Any comments?
Gosh, it's so lovely to see all those people on the list there, Marco, and all these, wow, friends. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite special to be here. In the course of the afternoon, you will see all the others coming up as well. Okay, with that, I will thank Sally Jane Norman once again for her presentation.
Thank you.
And we switch from the Kiwis to the Down Unders. Milenti Pandilovsky is calling in from Australia. If we can find him. Here he is. Hello. Hello, Milenti.
Hi, guys. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes. Both. Yes.
Fantastic. How much better could it be? Yeah, it's great to be here, like a syndicate meeting. Like if someone told me this like 10 years ago, I would have said, no, that's not possible. And then 10 years later, Andreas and Rasa organized it, and whoever else was in the committee. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be amongst friends. We had some discussion with Andreas about what it is that I would present, because I think the things that I'm dealing with at this point are quite different to the things that I was dealing with some 20 years ago. And of course, you know, there is the tyranny of distance and the tyranny of time as well, time which has passed, and I'll refer a little bit to time. We all change. We go through changes, and back then, I think in the 90s, we're in the middle of one needless and horrible war, and now again, some 20 years later, there is another European war, also needless, also horrible, also preventable, and one doesn't really know what to say. So I decided that my presentation will deal with somehow will refer to the current situation in Europe, the refugees, the internally displaced people, but more generally, you know, immigration, diaspora, but maybe more through a philosophical lens of time and space, when, you know, and grounding it somehow through the notions of temporality and being of Heidegger, but also Husserl, who's at the other side of the phenomenological spectrum. Yeah, so if I become too boring, just tell me, and then I'll move on. I also have a few slides, okay, I'll try to share the screen. Let's see if that works. That's not what I was looking for. Maybe this. Are you guys seeing the?
Yes.
Okay, so what are you seeing? Are you seeing all like the one by one slide or all of the slides?
We're seeing all of them.
All of them. Okay, I will try to correct that somehow.
Zoom doesn't like.
It doesn't really matter though.
No, it's fine. Zoom doesn't.
Yeah, I have a small laptop, and then it's kind of a.
Lenty, just leave it. It's fine like this. It's super. We know what's coming.
We got used to it.
And it's big screen. I mean.
Yes, and we get a view of the future as well.
I can also do this if you want. I mean, whatever works better. So I thought, you know, because we really don't know in what kind of a world we're entering. So I thought we might start with Henri Bergson and the idea that for a new object, we might have to create a new concept, perhaps a new way of thinking, is deeply repugnant to us. And it really, really is, always is. We've gone through a lot of different transformations, different developments. I mean, in the 90s, it was quite obvious that the data transmissions were like taking quite a leap. We had a lot of biotechnological developments. So the entire experiences of spatiality and photon have been altered. And this newly created global space-time phenomena inverts standard notions of periphery and center that's dominating a lot of our experiences. So the merging of this information of technologies has the capacity to change the essence of global relations with proliferation of everything, starting from international policies on intellectual property, rise of genomic databases, integration of biology, informatics, a war and how war is conducted at this day and age. We're seeing at the front quite new strategies, new tactics. The entrance of the drones in the past 10 years has been quite phenomenal. And then again, we're also entering stimulating debates, such as this one, in regard to ethics, economy, political, cultural spheres. All of this has been explored through phenomenological, post-structuralist, and biosemiotics perspectives. So, this all kind of brings me to Edmund Husserl's lectures from 1905 and 1910, where he was again captivated with many issues, but one of them, which was important for him, was referring to St. Augustine, who said, well, what then is time? Provided that no one asks me, I know. But if I want to explain it to an inquirer, I do not know. So I think we're more or less in that kind of a situation where we're talking about our new world, where we're headed. And of course, phenomenology has told us a lot about the lived experience and how to divide this lived experience onto subjective time, felt space, the felt body, the interrelationships with people. So if we bracket all of this, we're kind of, it's easy to feel these the lived experience, but also unlived experience can be as vivid, especially in a virtual world like this. Even if we go back to Hassan ibn al-Haytham, aka Alhazen's camera obscura, we will see a world which is unlived and yet a world which is vivid. I might refer to this later. I'm not sure at this point whether we're going to have time. But on a personal level, I remember that in my head, I've created memories of my grandfather, my father, his cousin, my uncle, who lived in the 20th century in Alexandria, Egypt, in Athens, in Katerini, in Greece. And these images were no doubt created by the help of my grandmother hitting the metaphorical shot and memory button of my mental camera obscura. But the imprints were everlasting. So I am in that world as well, which I have never really lived. And in many ways, this memory content of what is happening or not happening is, according to Norman Spear, is a function, like memory can be a function of the rate of forgetting. This is a project I curated in Winnipeg, in Canada, and it's called Magnetic This wasn't the project, actually. This was the project, and this is myself just baptizing the poor artists. These are magnets. So the idea was that he had no clue what this can do to his body. Neither did I, but nevertheless we went through it. So these are pretty strong magnets, which you shouldn't really be attaching to hit, but we went forward. He's still okay, from what I know. And in many ways, it's kind of connects me to my personal take on concepts of the body, of time and space, when speaking about the state of our world. And I think it's grounded much in Heidegger's notion of temporality and being on the move with, all the displaced people that we have, but also, people who, voluntarily come to Australia, for example, or New Zealand, to find a better place for living. And I assume I'm one of them. But also of other phenomenological categories of the lived experience. So Heidegger states that homelessness is coming to the destiny of the world. Hence, I think that rethinking this destiny in terms of the history of being and revealing the hidden in this is an increasingly common experience. He also delves deeply into issues of technology and writes in questions concerning technology on the essence of technology, suggesting that technology is the supreme danger to man. Well, as we have it here in this case, obviously. So this is Flusser, of course. Mitos, I think, referred to some of Flusser's thought as well. But Heidegger here delves deeply into these issues, and saying that technology is not equivalent to the essence of technology. When we're seeking the essence of a tree, we must become aware that which pervades every tree as tree is not itself a tree that can be encountered among all other trees. Likewise, the essence of technology is by no means anything technological. Thus, we shall never experience our relationship to the essence of technology so long as we merely conceive and push forward the technological, put up with it, or evade it. This is, of course, Obama in one of his technological undertakings. Technology may also be regarded as thirst for overcoming of these limitations and a tool which can assist us in achieving a higher form of understanding of the phenomenal world and its transcending. The worlds of the virtual and real have already created their own oppositions, so they've created each other. And no matter how paradoxical it seems, the conclusion imposes itself that the necessary simultaneous existence of these two worlds and our already ambiguous twofold inclination towards both, or the synthesis of oppositions, integration of what is being treated as virtual and what is believed to be real, as in augmented reality, for example, creates a new expanded world that is the possibility of a new profoundness of our being. So the products of these experiences can be considered as everything, deep mystical experiences. Luchazar showed us a few of those this morning, or synesthetic experiences, specific autistic-like realities, or experiences created by your home Oculus Rift, as Obama has shown. So nevertheless, they have a common code based on this permanent cultural revolution, which is serving as a reflexive or recurrent connection between the two realities. And we're increasingly becoming witnesses of how contemporary forms of transport and data transmission transform individuals and collective experience of the felt world. We're also able to witness the transformation in the structure of the geopolitical global space, which inverts the once stable places for center and periphery, origin and exile, governing the experience of diaspora, and with that, the notion of departure and dispersal, which it implies, as highlighted by Virilio, or for that matter, Marshall McLuhan's media theories of global village, the visual space, the auditive space, and the tetrad really have contributed a lot. And I've used quite a lot the tetrad in regard to analyzing technology, and I would urge anyone to really do it, because and I'll show you a little bit the tetrad later. So whether you're analyzing the activities of the drones or biotechnology or NFTs, it doesn't really matter. The tetrad is a fantastic tool which will enable you to figure out, to define a little bit better what you're encountering and how to deal with that. And then I have to say it's not only Marshall McLuhan's invention, the tetrad, but also credit goes to Eric, his son, who recently passed. Also, I've been quite interested that, and this is the tetrad. So basically, I mean, like in this white rectangle, you can just put in any technology possible, and then you have the enhancement, the reversement into the retrieval and obsolescence. I don't have time to explain this, but it is quite an important tool. And all right, so some 5 decades before Virilio, Edmund Husserl, who is another phenomenological thinker I usually go to, in his word, Decreasing the Europäischen Wissenschaften und die Transzendenziale Phänomenologie, published in Belgrade in 1936, gives an account of technology and the life world. He presents us by way of teleological historical reflection on the origins of critical scientific and philosophical situation, the inescapable necessity of a transcendental and phenomenological reorientation in philosophy, attempting thus to provide historical and causal accounts of the origins of consciousness. So Husserl, who for most part of his life was really concerned with attempting to establish a rigorous science free of all preconceptions, now concentrates on the ethos of history, the essential historicity of consciousness and its burden of preoccupation derived from traditions of the social milieu. So he comes up with the concept of Lebenswelt, or the life world, the intersubjective world of natural pre-theoretical experience and activity. And according to him, this theoretical attitude is exemplified, for example, by people like Galileo Galilei. And this arises historically against the backdrop of the life world, which essentially persists even after the development of the theoretical spirit. And Derrida sees Husserl as striving to maintain simultaneously the normative autonomy of the logical or mathematical identity as concerns all factual consciousness and its original dependence in relation to subjectivity in general. On the other hand, the young Husserl from the early 20th century declares phenomenology to be the study of structures of consciousness that enable it to refer to specific structures of consciousness which are proper object of phenomenology, and sees phenomenological reduction as a study of the substance of mind, which does not seem that something exists, a state that allows pointing of the mind en route towards real but also absent or imaginary meanings. So what he discovers when contemplates the contents of his mind are acts as remembering, desiring, and perceiving, and the abstract contents of these acts which he calls meanings. So these meanings, he claims, enable an act to be directed towards an object under a certain aspect, and such directedness he held to be the essence of all consciousness. How am I going for time, Andreas?
You should try and get to the end. Just, I'm looking at the watch. We need to watch the time.
Okay, so right, yes. So these are some of the projects I've curated. Of course, this is Stellark's ear at the beginning while he was working with Symbiotica. It's the quarter scale ear, and this is after the project has matured enough. Stellark actually, I mean, you've probably all seen this project. He's quite happy to show his arm. I mean, it's created in infection, and he's gone through a lot in order for this to be enabled. So I don't recommend it. But you know, there are fans, as you know, with any artist. I think Stellar a little bit more. And then I was also, oh yeah, so these are some other projects which are quite, I thought, you know, interesting in regard to just questions of the bodily exploration. So this is Gary Cass. one of the people who did one of the first bioart jobs as a technician, then moved on to being an artist, and now a very successful entrepreneur. So this is the evolution of the wine dresses. He is an entrepreneur in Sweden at this moment. He's come up with this a new way of using materials for clothing, and so this is the sparkling couture dress, which is, I mean, takes 92% less water than cotton does. So for areas like Australia, it's great. I mean, the material is called nanolose, and it comes from the foamy structure, which develops when, for example, you're maturing wine. So interesting project that artists have actually gone through in order to
give us your closing sentences, please.
Yes, well, closing would be that life, politics, and economy intersect at such speeds. And we are developing a new biopolitical model, it seems, although it's not very popular to say so, but the whole basis on which society functions has altered. I mean, there are many revolutions going ahead. One of them is the biotechnological revolutions, but there are all sorts of development in our world, and our biopolitical discourses also look into psychosomatic and the technological, and I think at the center of all of the discourses that we could be talking about, I wanted to talk about Flusser a lot and about his memory and reification of memory, but anyways, we don't have time about that. But at the center of this discourse is the notion that life can now be molded as we see it fit, thanks to biotechnology, and therefore biopolitics is this new era of biopolitics, being able to control life by taking it out of the natural domain, reshuffling it at will, and subsequently using it in a functional or structural form, thus freeing it from its natural environment. So a lot to digest, a lot to take in, and welcome to the brave new world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience?
I always wondering the year of
this is
Kalin function. I was always wondering if the implanted ear of Stellar was functional. Could he hear with it?
I did not hear it well.
Okay, I can repeat the question. The question from Kalin Dan is, Kalin is over here.
Yeah, I can see him, yeah.
The question is whether the ear, Stellar's third ear, was ever functional. Whether he could hear with that ear.
Whether he can hear with the ear. Well, it's not functional in that sense that he can hear with the ear. There have been quite a few developments, but I said that, there have been setbacks because he had an infection. So he had to go to the hospital like for almost a year and try to clean it up. Of course, the whole idea was that he would be hooked, to the internet, and it kind of goes along those projects that he did. If you remember that project with that gigantic head, which was something in between the hominoid and Stellar's bodily features, whereas you could ask the head anything and the head would respond because it would have data, so it would have searchable data basically. And this,
Kalin, sorry, what does it matter if it's visually there? That's all it should matter.
Folks,
it's visually there. If he hears with it, I don't care. It's his body.
Yeah, I always found it very interesting that the last person who found out about the ear was his mother, So his mother is quite, I don't know if I should be saying this, but quite a matriarch. So I think whenever he was going home, he went with long sleeves. So the whole world knew, but the mother found last, which was quite interesting to me.
Okay. I would like to defer that conversation and return you to the point that you make about homelessness, and that you didn't elaborate so much now, which I find sits in an interestingly awkward way with this more futuristic way of talking about the new technological era. So I wonder how for you those two concepts, you speak, in your abstract, and from what I gathered from our conversation previously, you're very much concerned about the displacement of people, the migration, forced migration, as well as voluntary migration, concerning Europe, concerning the political situation. And, how does that concern and this more conceptual idea about homelessness that you take, how does that sit with your enthusiasm, that's what it comes across as, for this new technological, these new technological paradigms?
That's a very good question. I think last year I would have known how to answer it a little bit better. But then in the interim, what happened was we were moving cities, and then even within the same city where I was living in Australia, we were moving houses. So we were in between houses. And I mean, it's nowhere to compare the situation with, the plight of the refugees, but we found ourselves to be living in, two motels in between houses in Mount Gambier, and one R&B in Adelaide. So I kind of played it as we're going for a holiday, but it was pretty obvious that the situation was becoming a bit desperate. And so my younger daughter refers to this as our homeless period, because really we were unrooted and we did not live at home. We lived in hotels, but still it's not at home. You have all the things, you don't know where you're going next. So in a way, it's very difficult. It's very subjective. What I'm trying to get at, children look at it differently. Older people look at it differently. Of course, families, like in the Ukraine, they had to decide what to do. Whether because the men couldn't leave, whether the women and children should leave. But then if they leave, then the families are apart. Of course, you can be in touch with media, and media helps us a lot with Zooms and whatever. But I've lived apart from the family in Canada for 2 years, and even with all the media, and even going with several times a year, if not 6 times a year to Europe, still it's quite different. So I can only I can't even think about how these internally displaced people in the Ukraine itself, or refugees are feeling, even though they're on the same continent. And what about all those millions of Africans and Southeast Asians, and just coming to a completely new mindset, just coming to Europe, looking at at Europe as a savior, sometimes swimming over the sea, and it just I mean, really, this personal take has to enter deep thoughts about time and space, and about this new situation, and that's why I showed this slide by Henri Bergson, that really we do not understand. It's very hard. Like the first thing is to understand the situation. Once we have a better grasp at it, it's from all the angles, we can come up with some solutions. But at this point, we're not even asking the question. And why? Because our minds are lazy to ask these questions. We come up with some formulas which we think are applicable anywhere and in any age and time. Same in 1903 with the Ilindan uprising in Macedonia and the hundreds of thousands displaced Macedonians. Or today, with the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, it's not the same. Of course, it's very different. Things have changed. Technology has changed. I mean, the blue planet is still spinning, but we don't even know if that's spinning at the same rate as it used to be spinning. So yeah, it's there are a lot of questions, and I think we have to go deeper.
That's a good point to send us off into the break with, that we don't know, and we haven't even found the right questions or found the words for the questions. I think we will continue backtracking on this in the course of the afternoon. Thank you very much, Milenti, for calling in so late in the day. And we'll take a 25-minute break. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.